Probably the most important thing that happened at the meeting was the UCUA Covanta. Sullivan had to exit the room as it was being discussed. You know, no great loss.
Amendment to the solid waste plan. Given my new position as the interim executive director of the Utilities Authority, I will need to recuse myself from any and all conversations, discussions, or votes. So that being said, I will step out of the room, carry on the business, and I'll send me the high sign, scope, and I'll come back if you're done.
Thank you for your
Thank you.
They will have to go back to all the municipalities and get them to sign again. This is how it played out. Okay, so they're now going to say this is going to save you $70 million. Before they said it was going to save you $276 million. And the person who's selling this is Sullivan. Now, you might not know, he is the new UCUA director. His qualifications for the position, I don't know exactly, but he is replacing someone named Sunil Garg, who sued Covanta because he thought Covanta was ripping off the Union County taxpayers. That got thrown out, I think, more of on a technicality than anything. There was some federal rules that it didn't rise to that level. I don't know if it was the statute of limitations, but there were some rules. That got thrown out 2 weeks ago. And subsequently, a few days later, Sunil Garg got thrown out. So now we have, Sunil Garg has here he is.
Doctor.
Yes. He's a PhD and Esquire.
Chemical engineering, right?
Yes, chemical engineering. He's got...
PhD in chemical engineering. PhD in chemical engineering. And Freeholder Daniel Sullivan, this is who he's replacing. He's also an attorney. What does Freeholder Sullivan do besides being a freeholder? He ran the Department of Motor Vehicles, as did... not the department, but one of the locations, along with two other county freeholders. That seems to be whatever.
No, he was an overseer.
He was an overseer. It was a crony job. Two other freeholders did the same thing, and they're unemployed too. So once one group comes in, the other group goes out. It's definitely a patronage job. So Freeholder Sullivan is replacing the executive director. And I just think this is funny. When I first read it, I just laughed out loud. He earned a doctorate in physical chemistry from Stevens Institute of Technology. He has a JD in law from Rutgers Law School. Rutgers.
Yeah, right. This is Sunil Garg.
Yes, Sunil Garg. He has business management in two of New Jersey's largest manufacturing companies, as well as practicing environmental and corporate transactional law, among others, at premier law firms in New York and New Jersey. So this is who Freeholder Daniel Sullivan is replacing. Never had a private sector job.
No.
Freeholder Sullivan.
No, Freeholder Sullivan, I believe, was manager. He was a manager of a department at NCR, National Cash Register, about 15 years ago. I think that's what it was. Devaney didn't have any private sector job, but that's something else. But who wants to talk about you? Want to continue?
Well, yeah, going on this UCUA Covanta, and we'll get more details into it as they're going to have to go out and sell this stuff again. And last time it was pretty easy because I know in Kenilworth, they came in, the tonnage. The cost per tonnage was lower this year than last year. Nothing was really explained, and you had Dakotas and Sullivan and all these people, and they just overwhelmed them. You go to a place like Kenilworth or Garwood or somewhere, they don't have the wherewithal to actually even read and understand what's going on. Because actually, it took quite a bit of time. I mean, going cold, I remember like 3 months, 4 months ago when this came up, and even before the meeting on February 24th when they put these things up there, They brought in Gable Associates and all those people. I didn't know what was going on. As it turned out, there was a debt restructuring, and in future years, the debt will be massive. And there's also a minimum tonnage that the cities have to put up. Even if they don't have a certain amount, they have to pay the higher amount, the minimum. So this may actually cost them money. Now some of us, will be contacting the cities prior to Dakota's presentation, if there is one, and hopefully there will be some better questions that will be asked of them. Because right now, from what I know, Covanta is making a ton of money off of this, Covanta Union. They are not making as much as they used to because the sale of electricity seems to have dropped for them. So they're trying to make up these profits by restructuring the debt. That's as far as I got so far.
This room soundproof? Yeah, I could hear. Oh, well, it probably won't affect anything. How would this ordinance, now back in February, there were like, everybody from UCUA was here, and they were bringing out these charts, and you went and signed up all these people. How would this change in ordinance affect I guess it was the 13 cities that signed up to the 2045 thing? Are you going to have to go back and re-sign them? Because I was in Kenilworth yesterday, and they're clueless. They have no idea if anybody's coming. So they'd be expecting Chairman Sullivan knocking at the door, or will you have to go back, re-sign? Will we have another big thing where we get to ask questions without any time limit? That was it.
Madam Chair, members of the Fluid Board, my name is Jonathan Williams, and I'm Special Counsel to the Union County Utilities Authority. There were a lot of questions raised by the speakers earlier. I did make some notes. I'm going to try and answer them as best as I'm able to have gotten them down. First of all, with respect to the change in the transaction, why are we back here tonight on this ordinance? When we were here earlier in the year, we were proposing a 40-year transaction which had benefits to the ratepayers in Union County, participating municipalities, and at that time we had put together a transaction that would be a 40-year term. There would be $12 per ton in savings for participating municipalities, and there were other benefits that we talked about at that hearing when the Utilities Authority Board was present. We then made submissions to the state of New Jersey. At the time, we had indicated that the 40-year term provided what we thought was the most benefit out of the transaction, and did involve a restructuring or refinancing of all of the outstanding debt on the facility. After the state of New Jersey retained the services of an economist to work on this transaction alone for several months, we answered over 200 multi-part questions from the economist. Last week, the local finance board approved the structuring of the financing with this one modification that has occurred. We shortened the term of the amended agreement with Covanta to the point where it will terminate or conclude in 2031. It's that shortened term and the decision by the state that they did not want to go out that far that required us to renegotiate with Covanta the terms of the agreement that we had previously discussed with you. What we've been able to accomplish with respect to that, and which was approved by the local finance board and has been signed off on by DEP last week, was that we're going to preserve the $12 per ton savings for the participating municipalities for each and every year through 2031. We're going to provide the County of Union with $2 million per year for each and every year through 2031 for direct taxpayer relief. I think one of the speakers said earlier tonight that they're always in favor of taxpayer relief. Well, that's what this transaction is all about. $2 million per year for all of those years to the county for direct taxpayer relief, a reduction in the cost of solid waste disposal of $12 per ton for each and every year through 2031. One of the other things that we've now built into the transaction is for the 7 towns that do not participate in solid waste collection, those towns will be receiving grants from the Utilities Authority of $3 per ton times the amount of waste that they generate within the municipality, which will go to direct property tax relief in the budget process in those municipalities. So that's the transaction going forward. With respect to the questions that have been raised about the financing, the prices are not going to escalate to 200 or whatever the dollars per ton are. The prices on the solid waste disposal for the municipalities, the $12 per ton savings, all of that is locked in by contracts. We will have to go back to each of the 14 towns and obtain new resolutions. We don't believe that that will be a difficult process because the savings are still there for a shorter term. The only question that was ever raised by anyone previously was the longer 40-year term, which has now been reduced. So it seems that if the savings are intact and the term has been reduced, we should have no difficulty with that part of this. We expect to close the transaction by the end of October of this year. All of the savings that we're talking about are retroactive to January 1, 2011, so that at the closing on that transaction, for instance, the towns that have paid the higher rate for the first few months of this year will get a $12 per ton credit or check if they want for the amount of waste that they've delivered for disposal up to that date. With respect to this idea or this notion that the structure of the financing is going to cost all this extra money, which was not previously discussed or disclosed publicly, I think we need to take a real hard look at that. The debt service on this transaction is going to be paid in one way, one form or another by Covanta. During the first several years of the transaction, Covanta will be paying enough money to the Utilities Authority to make the annual debt service payments that have been approved by the local finance board. During the last 5 years of the transaction, when those payments stop, instead we switch over to a revenue sharing plan where the Utilities Authority will receive about 50% of the gross revenues generated by all waste going into the facility, which is more than enough to pay the higher debt service payments during those last 5 years. We've also built into the transaction additional sources of funding for those payment obligations, and everyone needs to remember that at that point in time, the facility itself, which will have been maintained by Covanta at their expense, will be in completely good condition and will be worth, in excess of $300 to $350 million against a remaining debt service payment of about $88 million. Now, the only other thing I would mention, in all fairness, we have changed what we're doing in terms of the Utilities Authority and the county in exchange for all of the benefits that I've just described, which have been reviewed very closely by the state over and over and over and have been modified along the lines that I've discussed with you. The new transaction with Covanta does provide for a couple of things. The ordinance that you're voting on tonight does provide for a limited deficiency agreement, or should there ever be a shortfall in revenue for debt service payment, it does obligate the county to replenish the debt service reserve fund in order for those debt service payments to be made. We think that the risk based on the revenue into the facility, the rates that are being charged, and the agreements that we put in place is minimal. But it is a greater risk than previously existed with respect to the solid waste system. We're also going into the business, we're going to market an additional 100,000 tons of capacity, and the Utilities Authority will be able to pay Covanta a reduced rate, the $62 rate that we've negotiated, but in turn we'll be able to market that to other New Jersey municipalities and counties at a higher rate, and we will be keeping all of the difference, which will go back into the system to make sure that it remains solvent and that all debt service obligations have been made. Steve Rogat, bond counsel to the county, who has been reviewing not only the bond resolutions that were adopted by the Utilities Authority last night, but he certainly has participated in the review of the efficiency agreements that are before you tonight for approval. This here with me. Do you have anything you wanted to add? I really don't. So the thing to keep in mind as you consider your vote tonight, in the opinion of the Utilities Authority and the group of people who put this together, are the immediate tax relief savings available to all of our municipalities and all of our ratepayers. Something which, yes, does involve the county voting for these efficiency agreements, but it does result in rate relief and tax relief, something which I guess everyone in the room would endorse.
Thank you, John.
Tina Renner Cranford. I just have one issue. Honestly, I haven't been following it that closely. I depend on John Berry and Bruce Patterson to do that. But I look at things from a marketing standpoint, and all I keep hearing is a commercial tax relief. We're going to be performing tax relief. This is immediate tax relief. And the Union County Utilities Authority, instead of just, I don't know why they're going about it this way, but they're going to give the Union County freeholders $2 million to give back to the towns, and you're calling it direct taxpayer relief. So I'm picturing another, open space trust fund thing where you have this big event and you have the big blow up checks and it's just a photo op at election time to give these towns back a little bit of money. So I have an issue with that. And I just raised questions. Council people are very busy, they're very harried, they have a lot on their plate. And they're only getting one side of this commercial. They don't have the resources to hire someone to give them a different opinion or to actually look at what your attorney is giving them. So it's interesting. The whole process is very interesting to me. But you keep calling it taxpayer relief, and it's very condescending. Actually, I find it to be very condescending. But I just don't know how these council people can come to an intelligent, thorough review of this without having a counter to what you're offering them. You're spending a lot of money offering them, this commercial, but they really don't have the resources to do their due diligence. Thank you.
I've got three topics. The first is Covanta. Does anybody have to go? Can I? I don't care. It doesn't bother me one way or the other. Yeah, like I said, I was at the Kenilworth meeting yesterday, and they didn't know this was coming or they'd have to re-sign something, and they seemed a little foggy about how much they were even paying for tonnage. When this roadshow comes around again, they'll be a little more informed, and I'm trying, probably all of the towns will be a little better informed. First thing you got to know is that if rate relief was the issue, Covanta is making a ton of money according to their 10K statements. Out of $68 million in revenue that Covanta Union made in 2009, $17 million was profit, and they paid taxes on $7 million of that. The next year, they made profits of $10 million because there was or $13 million, $6 million was taxes, something like that. But there was a huge decrease in electricity sales. It went from 27 to 17 million. So I think that's the focus behind this. And it's not a savings for taxpayers. Taxpayers this year will save money, but down the line, and maybe not too far down the line, because there's a minimum tonnage that you have to go, and tonnage has been coming down. But I think when the CONUS people go to the towns, they'll find more questions.
The UCUA Covanta deal, the refinance of all the debt. I mean, I took a look at it. John's going to get into it too, but what I did was by Oprah, I actually asked for the amortization tables of the latest debt restructuring, and I took the PDF that they emailed me and I put it into what Dakotas Fitzpatrick had put together as a table D, I think it was, back in February. And it came out that there's about, right now from the old debt to the new debt and the refi, there's about 8.8 million down to about 6 million. This is over a couple of years, but anyway, but right now there's about $8.8 million in refi savings in debt service. So at this point, the question comes up as to what is that $8 million savings going to be comprised of? Well, $4 million goes from Covanta, from the savings to the UCUA Utilities Authority. Of that, they passed $2 million off as $12 savings per ton in shipping tipping fees to the 14 member towns. UCUA gets to keep $1.8 million. In addition, they also give $2 million to the county in this cost savings. Why? Tina, maybe you want to talk about that one? Because Tina says, well, Dakotas was using it as a advertisement of ratepayer relief and taxpayer relief. So the county gets $2 million to offset whatever's in their budget, and they say that that's actually taxpayers' relief. But the county has nothing to do with this whole deal anyway, but they're going to get $2 million out of the deal.
To parcel out to the towns.
Yeah, they're
At election time, I'm sure.
They're supposed to parcel it out to the towns, but they're not. It's in the budget. It was in the budget in the beginning of this year until the state told them they couldn't do it until they finalized this whole Covanta deal. So it was out of the budget, but it's going to show up again next year's budget. But in all this, the differential of tracking all these costs of this $8 million savings, it comes out to about $2.5 million can't be tracked. Now, if anything, that should be researched by the prosecutor's office too, or maybe somebody higher in the state, because there's money disappearing here too. According to Mr. Berry, possibly that money is actually being pocketed by Covanta to offset their electricity generating costs. So what we're doing is we're subsidizing Covanta again with this refi. I guess it's okay because they are losing money on the generating costs. But just to continue on with this bonding, what they did to provide our rate relief up front, they back-loaded the debt to the tune of tens of millions of dollars, where suddenly we're going to be not only just paying $55 a ton, but we're going to be paying $200 a ton, $300 a ton. Jonathan Williams of Dakota says, oh no, that's not true, but he really didn't face the major tens of millions of dollars that are back-ended on this debt. Nobody talked about that. I'll tell you, if anybody from the councils of the different towns, the mayor and the council from the different towns are paying attention, this is something you're going to have to pay attention to, because you may be getting a couple of dollars up front. Later on, you're going to be banged big time. Could be about $200 a ton you're going to be paying about 15 years from now.
My point on all of this, I look at things from a marketing perspective, and this is all a big commercial. The county is paying Dakotas a lot of money to put this deal together and to go out and sell it. The towns just sit there and they listen to this commercial. They don't have the resources to put into another opinion, or these council people don't even have the time to really do due diligence on these deals. So the county is really selling this hard. Even Sullivan taking over at Union County Utilities Authority, his thing is to get this thing pushed through. So it's really a big deal between the Union County Improvement Authority, the county, and Dakotas. So I don't know that the towns stand a chance. I just don't know how you could stand up to that and argue it intelligently. And besides, I don't like these people. I don't want to do business with them. I don't think that's an option.